And this is Steve. Tonight, we're going to talk about war and violence, but not in the traditional sense, because the traditional sense is everywhere, folks. I'm, a friend of mine was telling me about a story from when he was in high school, and he was one of 37 clarinetists, or whatever the word is, clarinetist, I don't know, but he was playing the clarinet. And in the middle of their performance, the reed on his clarinet broke. And save for one squeal that was made when it originally broke, no one even noticed that he wasn't playing the clarinet. He was just one of many, blurred right in. And whether his reed worked or not didn't much matter. So he went to the teacher and he says, "Hey, listen, I quit. I don't want to be in the band anymore." And the teacher looked at him and said, "I see, I understand." He said, "We have a lot of clarinetists. Why don't you go ahead and pick up the bassoon?" So in that moment, the guy said, "I'll give you a bassoon as long as you practice, and I'll give you free lessons as long as you'll take them." And all of a sudden, he was the bassoonist in the band. He was the only bassoonist in the band. And suddenly he had found his mark and found his place. And, I don't want to be the guy that's giving you the same tired story you hear on each and every one of these alternative media stations. I want to make sure I'm giving you something different. And the reason why I say that is because I don't think there's any value in being a copycat. I don't think there's any value in just driving these narratives home that you hear around the clock. And that is going to be why we talk about war and violence through a different lens here. Everyone's focused on Iran. Everyone's focused on Iraq. Everyone's focused on our military. It's almost as if the only violence we recognize in society is that done by militaries or police forces. We don't recognize violence through austerity. We don't understand violence to the poor. And we've been in a war forever. Forever. And in 2020, it's time we started looking at the death that is brought on by austerity as war, as violence. When I see people suddenly puff up and I see people willing to take to the street because of military violence. Now, don't get me wrong. It's all bad and it's all worthy of being fought against. But I realize that people don't really understand not only the issues that people are facing in this country, even when they're in the midst of it, but nobody seems to understand the impact of reduced deficits, reduced debt, and reduced spending. There was a person that was watching one of my Twitter posts earlier today and basically said to the effect of, the people that want to reduce spending are murderers. The people that want to reduce the deficit are murderers. The people that are cutting spending are murderers. And they're just as bad as the war machine. And he says, "Well, I have to object to that. I don't think they're as bad as the war machine." Now, I want to challenge you, because the reason why most people think this way is because they don't really, truly do not understand the impacts of reducing spending. It's like the only death you associate with violence is a bomb. That's the only death you see as violence. We've got to change that. All you have to do is take a ride, especially this time of year. No, it was unseasonably warm on the East Coast. But where there's snow, where there's ice, where it's cold, the poor, the homeless, they die in these conditions. They get sick. They don't have health care. They're mentally ill. They have no family. And when we reduce spending, they are the first ones that feel that pinch, that feel that cut. And for all those that die across the country and really around the world, but definitely in the United States, that war doesn't garner people taking to the streets. No one's making signs saying end austerity. No one's bothering. No one cares. No one realizes. They say they're for these things, but they don't realize this is life and death. They say they're for Medicare for all, but they don't realize it's life and death. They say that they're for getting rid of student debt. They don't realize that even in those conditions where people are carrying that heavy sack of debt, that suicides are out of control. That returning vets don't have anything to come home to, and suicides in the veteran community are out of control. I consider all of this murder, all of this preventable, and all of this an act of violence. Wouldn't it be grand if people took to the streets over those conditions? Yeah, you can get a good crowd to D.C. to protest Trump's tax returns. Hell, you can get everybody buying pussy hats to go do that. But you talk about austerity and you talk about death by spending cuts, people just go back to sleep. They don't even think twice about it. It's the most egregious sin that we don't put more of ourselves into fighting to save these lives. It grates my nerves when I see people chasing after talking about U.S. imperialism and things like that as if that's the only form of violence. I don't like chasing gossip stories. I don't like chasing the nonsense of this political guy said this. Oh, it's going to happen now. So-and-so's going to get trumped and whatever. I know people out there like that crap. I have no interest in it. Zero. Because it's not really actionable. It's infotainment at best. I really want to know what it will take to make people realize that as the cold weather really kicks in and the poor are really suffering, why we are not taking to the streets for those deaths just like we would for an anti-war movement, because it is war on our own soil. It is a civil war being waged through economic means. And we just act like it's no big deal. Like, of course we've got to reduce the deficit. Of course we got to reduce the debt. My God, it's unconscionable to have this debt. People don't realize it. They don't care. They just go start chasing after like the next headline to talk about. And until we eradicate poverty, until we literally make that the hill to die on, until we stop accepting murder as just happenstance, as they should have made better choices, until we really, really recognize the violence inherent in austerity, until we embrace that austerity really is murder, there's going to be a whole lot more death to deal with. So in 2020, I'm hoping that more people will be less worried about what some guy says in some newsreel or on a Twitter account, and more concerned with making sure your elected officials and those people that are running for office know that the federal government literally cannot go broke, and that these people that are going without food and without shelter and without health care, and all of us for that matter, going without health care, is completely a political choice and completely unnecessary and completely violence committed against the American people. It's a war. It's time we started fighting back like we're in a war. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a great day, everybody. I'm out.